I don't think Pierre Poilievre has to apologize. I don't think he has to change. If the next election is about Mark Carney and the beginning of, the first year of his mandate, then Mark Carney could lose.
Well, as we've known for the past few months, Carney and the Liberals are reeling. And the reason why we know that is because, well, the mainstream media is catching up. The public sentiment is beginning to catch up. People are getting increasingly impatient with this Liberal government, and the numbers are showing it. We see members of the establishment media hop on CTV with Vashti Capellas to admit this fact, the fact that the Conservatives, they're becoming a problem for Mark Carney, and he needs to get results fast, or his goose could be cooked in the new year. Things are getting very interesting. We're going to be talking about all this and the backpedaling and the scrambling that we are currently seeing in real time. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. Getting value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow. It helps us to get to new audiences. It helps people see there is something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. And now let's get our first story, shall we? As we know, Monday mornings typically are some very good content because all the Sunday shows take place and a lot of things are said. And we had Nick Nanos hop on, as well as JD, I'm forgetting his last name, with the press. And then you had Stephanie Levitz from Globe and Mail hop on with Vashti Capellas to talk about these issues and talking about how things are actually starting to tighten up. Yes, there's still a huge gap between preferred prime minister between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. I think Mark Carney's trending at like 52% preferred prime minister, and Pierre Poilievre's at like the 26% range at this point in time. However, the thing that they're getting concerned about is the fact that Liberals and Conservatives are still tied, even though there's such a huge gap in preferred prime minister between the two leaders. So how does that make sense? And it's because, well, Mark Carney stinks. He's not really getting a whole lot of results, and people are starting to see that, especially as jobs are getting shed by the day. And so Nick Nanos gets into this idea of the fact that, well, the Liberals truly believe if an election was called tomorrow that they would win. And this is what he had to say about that.
Maybe is multifaceted, but primarily driven, in the case of the Prime Minister and the people around him, by the fact that they think if there were an election tomorrow, they would have a more successful result than they did in the previous one, Nick.
Yeah, but
things can change.
The Liberals won the last election not by defending their record. The Liberals under Mark Carney won the election because of Donald Trump. Period. Full stop.
Honestly, give credit where credit. Give credit where credit is due. Nick Nanos telling the truth as we see it. Yeah, Mark Carney and Liberals didn't win because they were providing anything. They only won because of fear. And then he continues.
And now Mark Carney is governed for a little bit. He's going to have to defend what's happened or what's not happened in terms of what he's accomplished at since he was elected. And the thing is, I think for the Liberals, the Liberal path to victory is with the NDP collapsing and staying really low, and for the election to be about Donald Trump. The Conservative path to victory is for the NDP to somehow have some life in order to split the vote, and that for the election to be about jobs in the economy and how Mark Carney has not delivered on the promises at the pace that he told Canadians earlier this year.
I 100% agree with that analysis. We are very much, that's exactly what we're seeing currently, where you're seeing Donald Trump and the issue of Donald Trump falling to the wayside, at least on the polls Abacus Data has been doing. Donald Trump has fallen to like fifth issue people care about. First is cost of living. Second is the economy. Donald Trump's fallen long down the list. And that is the only way that the Liberals can win, is that people start fearing Donald Trump more than they do of their own pocketbooks, which we don't see happening because people are losing their jobs left, right, and center. We saw this with Algoma Steel, seeing this with Stellantis. We're seeing this with very much the sectors that are getting hit hard by tariffs right now are all kind of evaporating before our very eyes. And the issue that people are having on the ground is, you said you were going to be protecting us. You said that you're going to be taking care of us. And now jobs are getting lost. And what you're saying in the House of Commons is, well, at least we didn't lose all the jobs. That was the argument. That was the comeback of this Mark Carney government. Was, we lost 1,000 jobs at Algoma Steel. And then the news came out that they were going to be lost anyways due to the green technology that was being implemented. And they said, well, at least we didn't lose all the jobs. At least we're going to be able to keep somewhat of Algoma Steel around. That is how the Liberals are playing this game. Is they're playing, what did we accuse the Conservatives of doing during the election? Playing not to lose. Yeah, the Liberals are doing that now with our country. They're playing not to lose. They're just trying to mitigate any damages. They're not going out and getting proactive, such as building pipelines. Oh, but they signed an MOU. Yeah. They set up a plan for a plan that hopefully might happen if everything goes well, starts in 2029. 3 to 4 years' time, we might see shovels in the ground of a pipeline. What do you think is going to happen between now and then? Look what has taken place since April this year. What do you think is going to happen in 4 years? So as I said, they're just playing not to lose. And Patty Hajdu, cabinet minister for the Liberals, went on Vashti's show last night as well to defend this record, to defend what's happening. And she really tries to talk up the idea that they're really doing well, that considering everything they're facing, well, Canadians should just be grateful for what they have. The workers in these sectors should just be grateful for what has not happened, instead of the Liberals faltering on their promises that they're going to save everybody. And with that, I'll say this. We are in a technology age. We are in an age where your information is being sold at a premium. You might sign up for a newsletter, sign up for a loyalty card. The next thing you know, you're getting spam calls and you're also getting spam emails, and people just won't leave you alone. And quite frankly, if you're like me, you're one of those types who's just resigned and hoping and praying nothing bad happens in the long run. Then a service called Incogni came across my desk. A service that scours the internet for your information and puts requests in to make sure that your information is removed from these third-party services who are selling your information at a premium without your discretion. As I've said, there's times I've signed up for newsletters, signed up for loyalty programs, and all of a sudden I'm getting phone calls from numbers I otherwise don't know anything about. Or I'm getting emails, again, from addresses I know nothing of and didn't ask for at any point in time. Or even worse, you hear of a big data breach of a service you don't even use, and somehow you find out your information was leaked in it. And that's where Incogni comes in clutch. You simply log in, put your information in, and then they start looking across the internet of where your information's been used, sold, or being traded with third-party partners. I've only been using it for the past week, and they found 39 instances already of services who are using my information and selling it at a premium or trading it at a premium. In this case, they found 39. They've resolved 26 of them already, and they're still working on the other 13 to get them removed immediately. And you can see my whole activity log right here. And as a bonus, get an extra level of protection with Incogni's custom removals feature in the Unlimited plan and Family Unlimited plan. You can point to any search site or other website where your personal information is visible, and one of their privacy agents will take care of the rest for you. If you want to keep your internet ID safe online, then download Incogni today. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code ELEVATE at incogni.com/elevate, and that's incogni.com/elevate, and you can get 60% off their annual plan today. And that is, again, incogni.com/elevate. Use code ELEVATE at checkout to get 60% off their annual plan. Now let's get into our next story. Watch this.
But the other piece of it is that we have to protect these industries as well, because ultimately there are still, 1,700 jobs left at Algoma Steel that wouldn't have been there yesterday if the steel mill closed entirely. That mill would not have been able to bring back different forms of production if they lost the workers that they currently have. So this is about saving the furniture, Vashi, in the steel industry. This is about making sure that we have a steel mill in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. And this is about making sure that our companies, our Canadian companies, are well positioned to be able to find new markets and create new products. And that's the purpose behind these loans.
But is that the guiding theory, like save the furniture? Because I think of the President Trump, for example, this week, surrounded by the CEOs of auto companies who were supposed to come to the defense of an integrated sector and instead stand next to him in the Oval Office, essentially, groveling, saying how great he is, how great the tariffs have been. Like, I can only imagine how an auto worker would feel looking at that. Is my best hope that that the furniture is saved in the industry? Like, well, is that enough?
Look,
Vashi hit it though. That's what people are thinking. When they hear that, it's like, well, at least we didn't lose everything. And I can't feed my family right now. I don't know if I can afford this year's Christmas. I don't know where I'm going to be in 2026. But at least we didn't lose all the jobs, right? Okay. She continues.
I think we're talking about two very different industries. And in terms of steel, I can tell you that without a sovereign steel industry in Canada, it's going to be very hard to build Canada strong. So there's an effort to make sure that we have a footprint that's Canadian owned. In terms of other international corporations, I think you've heard my colleagues speak that we're going to get our money back. And that's just...
Do you really think that's true? I mean, the Stellantis CEO is standing there saying, look how great it is that we're investing all these billions of dollars in America. He doesn't seem to care.
Well, look, I can't speak to what his motivations are, but I can tell you that we're going to stand up for Canadian dollars, and we're going to go after that money.
Do you think you're actually going to get it? Like, has there been, like, again, you know, this is another case of sort of money that was extended to this company who is basically laughing in our face. Like, it's
egregious. I agree with you. It's egregious.
But what is the evidence that you're actually going to get that money back?
Well, I think
again, we have no transparency other than the industry minister getting up in QP saying it's going to come.
Look, you'll have to ask her the questions because I don't have the details at hand in terms of what litigation they're going to pursue, but that will be our effort. We will make sure that we will do everything in our power to get that money back. But I will go back to Algoma Steel because I think, you know, when we're talking about Canadian companies, whether they're lumber companies, whether they're steel companies, Canadian companies have an important footprint. And we're going to continue to fight for those Canadian companies' viability because without that, it's going to be very hard to build Canada strong. And
duh. Of course. If we don't have industry here, we just can't build a country. Wow. Learned that in the 10th grade. What are we doing here? They treat us like we're stupid. And people are starting to catch on. It's starting to show in the polls. People are starting to get frustrated. And the fact of this whole MOU of, yeah, we're building industry. Trust me, we're building pipelines. We're going to build Canadian steel, baby. It's going to be all good. There is nothing about the MOU that anyone can actually take seriously. We know that both sides are trying to champion that this was a good thing because, well, Carney wants to keep Alberta as part of Canada. Daniel Smith wants to keep Alberta as part of Canada. So they're, of course, they're going to champion this, even though there's a lot in this deal that both sides are really upset about. But even having a promise on paper ticked off Carney's caucus, ticked off his cabinet. They didn't want this. The fact he's even talking to them, the fact he even made a promise that could potentially maybe come to fruition in 4 years, they were offended by, which shows you just how ridiculous this party is. And Mark Carney literally doesn't really have a whole lot of control over them, does he? And Pierre Poilievre caught on to this. The Conservatives caught on to this. They saw what the likes of Erskine Smith put out. They saw the likes of multiple BC Liberal MPs put out saying, this thing cannot happen. This is not good for us. We cannot let this stand. Trust me, this won't happen. You had the likes of Mark Miller saying, yeah, what happened with that MOU was probably going to be the hardest thing in the life of that pipeline. They have contempt for this project. They have contempt for our industry. They have contempt for us being able to do anything to build this country. They don't want it. And Pierre Poilievre is putting the lack of loyalty and the disjointed nature of that party right now to the test tomorrow. Poilievre has put this forward, an opposition motion to be voted on in the House of Commons. It says, take note of the Memorandum of Understanding between Canada and Alberta of November 27, 2025, and supports the construction of one or more pipelines enabling the export of at least 1 million barrels a day of low-emission Alberta bitumen from a strategic deep-water port on the BC coast to reach Asian markets, including through an appropriate adjustment to the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, while respecting the duty to consult Indigenous peoples. So they're going to vote on this. Again, it's not binding, but this is more, people are really frustrated. People who don't understand the ins and outs of Parliament at times are really frustrated about this because they're just like, well, this is just theater. Carney and Smith already came to an agreement on this. That's what the MOU was. What are we doing? What are we wasting our time on this for? And I'm like, well, I would say it's theater. It is to a degree. It's more to prove a point to the Canadian population that this Liberal government doesn't actually want this. And it shows that there's a lack of agreement inside the party that this probably is not going to happen. So what it's going to do is this is going to be brought forward in Parliament. They're going to have to vote on it. And we'll see how Liberals vote. These MPs who've been talking a lot of smack, the likes of Guilbeault, the likes of Erskine Smith, the likes of this Liberal BC caucus, they're going to have to vote on this. And they're going to have to agree that they want a pipeline built and the tanker ban removed. because that was what was in the MOU. Are you going to vote yes? Are you going to vote no? What do you want? And based on the result of that vote, it's going to throw this Liberal Party into chaos. They are falling on the weight of their own BS. And Poilievre and the Conservative Party are simply just pushing them in that direction, showing that they are disingenuous. They don't actually care about Canadians. They never did care. And they're only trying to play lip service and not actually get anything built or done. So tomorrow, this will be interesting. We'll see how this all goes. Because as well, as we're losing our Canadian jobs, as we're losing our industry to the States right now, well, then you have the likes of Donald Trump, who is contemplating pulling out of CUSMA, contemplating pulling out of the USMCA. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, I'm not a huge fan of this current panel they have on CTV of the likes of Corey Tenike, Scott Reed. But however, there was something Corey brought up that I'm like, you know what? I don't necessarily disagree. Steve hits the point of like, if Trump pulls out of USMCA, CUSMA, we're toast. And Corey's like, you're right. However, there is something to think about. And I thought this was interesting.
Well, it's our most important trade deal in the world. It's with the country that we do the most trade with. So, you can't overstate how important it is. I really, though, I'm much more optimistic than Scott is around this. Like, I think that we're seeing signs of rising unpopularity in Trump. He's polling at the lowest level he has since he got into the White House, and one of the lowest levels in the history of presidential polling. Frankly, he's at like 36% approval. So I'm a lot more optimistic that the headwinds around declining jobs in the manufacturing sector in the United States, concern about cost of living, unpopularity of tariffs in the U.S. public, all of those things, are piling up, and I think are going to be, strong headwinds against, what the president would like to do, which I agree he would like to get rid of CUSMA. It's just not something that he can do on his own. He needs congressional approval, and I just don't think he's in a position to get it today.
And honestly, I kind of agree with that point, where there's a lot of turmoil happening in politics in the U.S. as well, where you have the likes, since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the right wing has completely fractured in the United States. They're all at each other's throats, fighting each other. You have Candace Owens doing her thing, Tucker Carlson doing his thing, Tim Pool yelling at people. It's like, some of the core personalities in the U.S., on these perceived right wing, are not doing great. And it's followed up to Trump's office, where Charlie Kirk had a huge impact and was a huge voice in Trump's ear. And now that he's gone, there's a lot of chaos happening and a lot of they're kind of focusing on things that people don't really care about to a degree. There's this growing faction where you have the population as a whole wants to see cost of living come down. Very similar to here. Imagine that. And then as well, they also want to see serious moves made on immigration. And what's happening right now is there's a lot of emphasis on immigration in the United States by the Trump administration, but they haven't really moved the needle much on cost of living, at least from a perception perspective at this point. And that is not good. So because of that nature, because of people are kind of feeling a little uneasy with what's happening, yes, the politics around Donald Trump being able to potentially be able to pull out of the USMCA, CUSMA, actually may not have the political will in the United States to be able to do it. However, the threat of it is enough. And it's a threat that Mark Carney hopes that Donald Trump will pull the trigger on. Because we talked about at the beginning of the show. If Donald Trump pulls out of CUSMA, then, our country is in free fall. And that's the exact chaos the Liberals need in order to win a majority government. However, if it continues as it is, no movement happening going on with Donald Trump, nothing moving on in terms of actual concrete deals happening that is bringing money into the country. Pipelines are not actually moving. Industry is not actually moving. And we keep seeing job losses. Well, it's going to become about the cost of living. It's going to become about the economy. And that's when the Conservatives likely would win that election. So Mark Carney is pushing, and he's secretly hoping, that Trump pulls out of CUSMA, because that means he'll get a majority mandate. But if it continues as it is, you're going to see Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre, my friends. Whether it be in a minority or majority government, we don't know that far yet. However, it trends in that direction. And this is something where I want to go back to the Nick Nanos, Stephanie Levitt's panel when they discussed what Pierre Poilievre can do with where this current data is at in order to secure a victory. And this is what they had to say.
I think the second thing, to just build on what JD said, is coming out of that leadership review, Mr. Poilievre himself acknowledges that maybe he is not the most beloved political figure on the landscape right now. Everyone says that. They have a new campaign manager in place now, Steve Outhouse. How are they going to start building out Team Poilievre?
Right.
Because Mr. Poilievre cannot turn into a magically different person between now and the next election, but he does have around him capable, competent people that perhaps they can start pushing forward, showcasing them, and giving people a taste of what not just Prime Minister Poilievre would look like, but what would a Poilievre government look like.
Yeah, I think I agree with Stephanie 100% on the Team Poilievre, because I think that helps. I think beyond that, just looking at the numbers, for the people that are voting Conservative, they hate the Liberals, they hate the last 10 years, they just want the Liberals out. I don't think Pierre Poilievre has to apologize. I don't think he has to change. I think he has to show that there might be some people around him that suggest that it is a government, not a Prime Minister in waiting, because he's trailing on the Prime Minister front, that the Conservatives are a potential government alternative and a government in waiting, and to hope that somehow the Liberals mess things up, because in most elections they're lost. And you know, if the next election is about Pierre Poilievre, he will lose. If it is about Mark Carney and the beginning of, you know, the first year of his mandate, then Mark Carney could lose in that instance.
Okay.
The one thing I really appreciate, it was kind of wild to see this coming from the establishment media here, was saying Pierre Poilievre doesn't have to apologize for himself. He doesn't need to change. However, it's time to really put Team Poilievre out there and let them shine. And that's exactly what they've been doing. And that's why you're starting to see more of Michelle Rumpel-Garner going after Lena Diab in committee. You're starting to see more of Jamil Javani going after Bill C9. You're starting to see the likes of Andrew Lawton doing his thing. You're starting to see you're seeing more of Michael Barrett out there. That is a part of that strategy, and I 100% agree with it. That is how you counteract this whole issue of people not liking Poilievre's personality, is you push people out that have a different type of personality, have a different type of viewpoint on things. And people can warm up to that. It can warm up to the government that's saying, okay, it's going to be a team approach from the Conservative Party. I can get on board with that, to at least the people that are uneasy about Pierre Poilievre in general. It is fascinating to watch and seeing how this will all go down. But what we're going to see this week, and you keep an eye out for it, is this is the last week before Parliament rises for the Christmas break. So the good thing about that is the fact that talks on Bill C9 after this week are on pause until the new year, which is nice. You get a break on that. The likes on Bill C8, pause. We wait until the next year. A lot of these bills that are coming in that are very draconian and very concerning are on pause now. But what we're going to see a lot more is rhetoric and flame throwing as we go into the break, as Parliament just isn't working. And that will strike a very interesting tone as we go into the Christmas break. But anyways, I'll see you this afternoon. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.